Episode 41, what got you here won't get you there. There's a moment when you walk out of a meeting and think, why is this harder than it used to be? Mm-hmm. The sales aren't coming in like they used to. The team didn't respond the way you expected. The old playbook just isn't working anymore. There's a frustrating truth about leadership that we don't understand until it falls into our laps. What got you here won't get you there. We've heard that phrase. We're familiar with that phrase. But we've got to lock in and really understand, where does the rubber hit the road as it relates to our leadership and the experience that we all have over and over and over and over again, that really amounts to this simple phrase: what got you here won't get you there. Most leaders don't hit a wall because they're lazy, incompetent, or uncommitted. We hit a wall because the strategies that once worked, the skills that we once employed, our knowledge base, our understanding at some point in the past just simply doesn't cut it in the present, right? So at first, doubling down feels like the right thing to do. Responsibility, right? We work harder, we move faster, we tighten control, but eventually effort stops producing progress. And this isn't failure. It's frustration, but we cannot read this as failure. It's actually an inflection point, an opportunity.
Yep. That's right. And the leaders who grow are the ones who recognize that the problem isn't effort, right? It's not, I'm not going to fix where my business is stuck by just doing more and doing it harder. The problem is actually development. And I want to take a moment too to recognize that this isn't just about what we need to do as leaders. It's about what we are longing for our businesses, right? We have a vision for what we're trying to build, what we're trying to create. Yeah. And the frustrating thing that we experience as people who have built something wonderful, something successful, is that we're like, but there's more. I see another hill that I want to take. And for some reason, all those things I used to do that got me onto the top of this hill don't seem to be working. They're not getting me to the next hill.
Yeah.
And when we are working with leaders that are experiencing this type of thing, we'll hear them say things like, I'm doing everything I know how to do, which if that phrase is resonating with you leaders, like, trust me, it's resonating with Eric and I right now as we struggle. You know, we're in this same battle of building out a business. And I have so much empathy if that phrase is resonating with you today. You might be saying something like, I'm trying harder than ever, and it just isn't working. And the bruise that I'm going to poke for just a minute is that what we're really struggling with, the fear beneath those questions that we're asking, is, what happens if I can't figure this out? What happens if I can't figure this out and everything starts to fall apart? So, Eric, let's just lean into that space a little bit. Let's unpack it. What is the problem that leaders are actually facing if this moment is feeling especially pertinent to them today?
I love that question. And when I say I love it, I hate it. And that's why I love it. It's a love-hate relationship with that question that haunts my mind all the time, as I'm sure it does yours as well. What if I can't figure this out?
Yeah.
What if I don't get the necessary breakthroughs to get me to the next iteration of my business, of our revenue, of our sales, of our marketing, of our reach, of our new products? What if I can't figure this out? And I think that question creates kind of what you mentioned earlier. It's what drives imposter syndrome. It's what drives insecurity and fear. And so I want to encourage our listeners with something that you and I have been talking a lot about lately, as we're butting up against our own challenges, our own breakthroughs that we're fighting for, but have not yet achieved.
Uh-huh.
And it's simply this, that when we're face to face with these challenges, there's two options. We're either going to shrink back or we're going to expand.
That's right.
And shrinking back is driven by fear, insecurity, and when we begin to lose hope and give in to the negative side of, what if I can't figure this out? But we can flip the question. What if I can figure it out?
That's right.
What if I can get the breakthrough? What if I can get to the next level? What if I can? That requires faith, right? From a spiritual perspective, people often define faith as a confidence, a certainty, a hope of something I can't yet see.
That's right.
And in business, I tell people all the time, whatever your spiritual, religious, philosophical background, we as human beings require faith.
Yeah.
We require faith when we start into a new job, that job's going to be a good fit, that it's going to work for us, that we're going to enjoy it. We require faith when we step into a new relationship. I believe this is going to work regardless of what I've experienced in the past.
That's right.
Right? We require faith to launch into New Year's resolutions, which, we just crossed the new year into 2026, and so many people have set new goals and new ambitions. Faith is required for us. We are creatures that literally are fueled by faith. And faith causes us to expand and to put our hope in the possibilities of what the future can look like. Those are the only two. What would you say?
Even when we can't yet see it.
Even when we can't yet see it. And so those are the only two options when we're face to face with this tension.
That's right.
Right? Is we're either going to shrink back or we're going to expand. And I want to encourage our listeners that for me, I know every single day I wake up and I feel the weight of this question. What if I can't figure this out? What if we can't figure this out as a business? And I have to flip that question in my mind. It's like an intentional exercise, a practice of, but what if we can figure it out? And then I have to choose faith over fear. I have to choose expansion over shrinking back. And I think the rest of this episode, we're basically going to be talking about what is required of us as leaders if we're going to be the kind of people who expand rather than shrink back.
Yeah, because shrinking back is an option. It is always an option. And so what we have to ask ourselves is, which hard do I choose? Right?
Ooh, yeah.
Which hard do I choose?
Yeah, they're both hard.
They're both hard.
Yep, they're both hard. Okay, so let me jump in with this. So I think when growth slows and momentum we feel momentum kind of flattening out. Leaders don't usually think, I need to change. I need to think differently. I need to operate differently. I need to lead differently. Our default is more often, what do they need to do different? What's wrong with my team? What's wrong with the business? What's wrong with my customers? What's wrong with my supply chain? What's wrong with our vendors? What's wrong with the market? What's wrong with the economy? What's wrong with politics? Right? And so it's really important that we address this issue, this default mechanism that we all have, that when we're up against this challenge, to kind of project responsibility anywhere else besides ourselves.
Right.
Now, the problem with that is then we're making everybody else responsible, which actually is a form of giving up our power. But taking personal responsibility, to ask the question first and foremost, if we need a breakthrough, if we're trying to achieve something new, what is required of me? Now, all of a sudden, I'm back in the driver's seat and I have the power. I have the authority. I get to be in charge of the future and fighting for that future. And one puts us into a victim mentality, and one gives us the chance to be the hero of the story.
That's right.
Of our own story. So oftentimes we get stuck thinking what worked before. And so then we go back to decisions that we used to make instinctively in the past. right? The pace we used to run at, the habits that produced the results that we have experienced, right? We lean harder on the instincts that built momentum yesterday, last year, 10 years ago, right? We create rhythms that once drove growth. We default to old habits because those habits feel like certainty today, and yet they worked in the past.
That's right.
Right. And because those patterns have been proven, it makes sense that we would just go back to that same toolkit.
Yeah. And let me pause here and say that is true about our brains, whether we're talking about business or personal habits or relational or financial, decision making. We love to rely on things that have a proven track record. That makes total sense. So let's just pause and say, like, it makes sense that as leaders, we try to do this. But what we're going to tell you is that it's a waste of time. And so if we can shortcut the process, it's much preferable.
Agreed. I love this. I'm going to get derailed too easily, so I need to move on. So just the mindset that keeps us stuck, right? Is what worked for our team when we were only 5 people, but now we're 50 people.
Yeah.
Right. What worked when the business was smaller, but it's no longer that size anymore. Right. What worked, the complexity that worked in the past doesn't necessarily work today. And the problem is that circumstances have changed. The landscape has evolved.
Yes.
Right. The environment is different. And here's the part that most of us as leaders don't recognize until we're in trouble.
Yeah.
Right. That everything around us has changed. But here's the question. Are we changing? Are we evolving? Are we becoming a new kind of leader to meet the new challenges of a new day? And so when you keep repeating old patterns, you're not actually moving forward. You're trying to get back to a version of the business that no longer exists. Let me just say that one more time.
Yeah.
Too often when we're working with leaders, we find that they are literally trying to go back to a version of the business, of their team that no longer exists. And that's scary. That's scary because now we are venturing into uncharted territory.
Right.
But let me just say this. That's why we're leaders, right? Because as leaders, part of our responsibility is to chart new territory. Right. To lead our teams into places that we've not yet been, to encounter challenges and problems that we have not yet experienced. And I think oftentimes as leaders, our temptation is to see that as failure, setback, we're going the wrong direction, when in fact, it's an opportunity to recognize there's something new for us.
That's right. There's
something for us to expand into, or out of fear, we're going to shrink back to what used to be.
And this is such a reality that we as leaders have to confront. I mean, I forget who said this, but there's a story of one of the original explorers that coming to America, when they finally landed here, it was so hard, it was so new, it was so different that everybody wanted to leave. They wanted to get back on the boats and go back to wherever they came from. And the leader said, burn the boats. Burn the boats.
Yep.
We're not going back. We have to figure out how to become the type of people that can succeed in this new landscape, in this new environment, in this new reality. And because our realities are often not as dramatic as that, where we land ourselves on a brand new shore, we don't always realize that this is the moment that we're facing. We often can sense that something has shifted, that something's not working, long before we can fully understand what it is, right? It would be really easy and super helpful if there was a neon sign that blinked and said, you're in a new space. This is a new time to upgrade the skills, time to develop new habits, new strategies. But that's obviously not what happens. And so what we can pay attention to is when we sense that the weight or the margin is shrinking, when we sense that we're doubling down on what used to work and it's not moving the needle anymore,
Mm-hmm.
when we sense that things inside of us are starting to tighten up because it feels uncertain, that's the invitation to recognize that maybe we need to burn the ships.
Wow. I mean, just let's pause for a second and just give me a moment, give us a moment, give our listeners a moment to ask that question. Mm-hmm. Where in our life do we need to burn the ships? For some of us, it's in our marriage, mm-hmm. or in a long-term relationship, mm-hmm. where we keep thinking, I'm going to go back to something else. I'm going to find something different. There's the greener grass. There's something better out there. Mm-hmm. And we might need to burn the ships on the conversations about divorce and just saying we're done. Sometimes we need to burn the ships as it relates to a job that we feel stuck in, that's no longer working, and we're just doubling down on our effort, hoping that we can make our relationship with our boss or this toxic culture work for us, right? Because of our fear, right? Because we're always driven to shrink back by fear, the fear of not having the paycheck, of not finding a new job.
Yeah, the fear of doing something different, even when our current context sucks. We love the devil we know, right?
Yeah.
And that'll keep us stuck.
Yeah. So just maybe for our listeners to have a moment to ask the question, where do we need to burn the ships? Mm-hmm. Right. Where do we need to choose faith and expansion over fear and shrinking back? And here's the scariest part. There's no guarantee of what the future holds. However, there's an old saying that we're all familiar with. We oftentimes do not engage change until the pain of staying the same is worse than the pain of change.
That's right.
Right. And so we can't guarantee, as coaches, with all the leaders and organizations that we have the pleasure of working with, we can't guarantee that letting go of a long-time employee who we're terrified if they're gone, but they're toxic, but if we lose them, then everything's going to fall apart. Yep. We can't guarantee that the next hire is going to be the best fit. It's going to take them to the next level. We can't guarantee that if they launch a new product that's feels a bit risky, mm-hmm. that it's going to move the needle on their revenue. Right. We can't guarantee that an acquisition of another company is going to prove profitable and a good move. And yet the best leaders, I think, in history, and I love biographies, about leaders in particular, but the leaders who have made the biggest dent in their industry, in their organization, in their futures, were the people who were willing to operate by faith. And we're not talking blind faith. We're not talking, irrational faith. We're not talking unmerited faith. We want to know the data. We want to have all the information that we can. But at the end of the day, to move into uncharted territory means we have to go to a space that we don't know, mm-hmm. and that we may not have the confidence yet. That's the operative phrase there, yet, or word, that we know how to navigate it. But here's the thing. What got us to where we are required that same faith.
That's right.
To start your company, mm-hmm. to expand your team, to expand your product line, to venture out and ask people to spend money on your business. Mm-hmm. Whatever it is, it required faith to get where we are. And to get to the next iteration, the next level is going to require a new expression or exercising of faith.
I love that, because what it reminds us is we already know how to do this. We already know how to do this. And we've already survived having to do this in the past.
Yeah, that's good. That's good for our listeners to be able to think back and say, you've already done this probably multiple times across multiple areas of your life. You survived it. Did they all pan out the way you expected? No. But I can almost guarantee that our listeners, if we reflect back on our journey so far, can identify that the biggest breakthroughs, the greatest things that we've experienced in our life up to today, were catalyzed by an exercising of faith.
That's right. And the trap that we can all get stuck in, I get stuck in this same trap, is that was freaking hard, and those things worked. They were the skills necessary to help me survive until this moment. And the problem is, if we aren't willing to acknowledge the fact that what got us here won't get us there, we are destined to continue to repeat those same habits and behaviors, and we'll get stuck.
Yeah.
Because what was required of us at the last level, what was required of us for us to survive childhood, we had to evolve beyond at some point if we wanted to grow into healthy adults. What was required of us to start our business is not the same skills, habits, tendencies that are going to be required of us to move into this next level. But the trap is that we feel like they will be because they worked before.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. Wow. I'm sure our listeners can hear in our voices and the way we're processing this, that we're in the midst of our own faith journey, right? We're in the midst of our own, we're up against challenges. We're trying to build out new parts of our business. You know, we spent this whole last 2025 essentially building out this suite of products to give more people access to our leadership operating system, which, by the way, is a framework that teaches us how to operate in this space of faith, as we're calling it. Yeah. And yet we feel the weight. We feel the fear. We feel the temptation to shrink back. I mean, how many times, Dawn, have you heard me as we're kind of processing the challenges we're up against? And I'm not saying, I've never said, let's burn the ships, but I keep saying, we're not going back.
We're not going back.
This is our path. We're going to fight for those breakthroughs. And whether we achieve them or not, we believe this is the right battle to be fighting. And so we're going to stay in it. And whether we win or lose, here's the thing that I'm absolutely committed to, is that these are the breakthroughs that we want. Mm-hmm. This is what we believe is worth fighting for. This is the mission that we feel that we're giving our lives to in this season. And I think that is the constant conversation that we have to learn how to do with ourselves as well.
Yeah. And listeners, we are way off script on this. However, what is required in that moment in order to even get on the boat in the first place is a vision of what we're trying to accomplish that is compelling enough that says, this is worth it. This is worth the pain and the struggle, the heartache of evolution, right? I mean, you think about metamorphosis. The caterpillar literally has to decompose what it was in order to become the next thing. And that for me is always a really helpful image when I'm like, God, this is so hard. Yeah, I'm literally becoming something new. And I have to behave like that new thing. I have to engage in the habits that will develop that new character. I have to decide to enter the cocoon before I have the skills to do it, before I know what the outcome is going to yield, before there's any proof in the pudding, right? And that's why having a compelling vision and why you and I continue to go back to this is what we're fighting for. This is where we're going. This is the next hill that we're claiming. Because without that vision, there's no way to sustain the pain of transformation.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And to write that vision down, to plaster it on the walls, to wake up and remind yourself of that vision every single day. And that it's in any area of our life, whether they're health goals or relational goals or financial goals, yep, or whatever goals we have set for ourselves. We have to have that vision. It has to be something worth giving our life to. Right. I mean, I'm almost 25 years married now. And Dawn, I don't know how many years are you guys have been married?
22. Yeah.
22. And how many times have we had to enter back into the cocoon and be willing to engage a process of transformation because we believe what's on the other side is worth it. Okay, I know we're off script. Let's get back online where we're trying to go. I'm hoping that we haven't been too derailed and that our listeners are tracking with us. But let me say this. Here's what I want our leaders, our listeners to understand about these kinds of moments that we're talking about. That they are not a sign that we've reached the end, right? They're a sign that our environment is changing and inviting us to change with it, right? Because the one thing is for certain is that everything in the world is constantly evolving and changing. And the question is, will we keep pace with that change, right? So leadership complexity increases, challenges increase, pressure increases, but the new leadership skills and abilities that are needed, like you just said, haven't been developed yet, right? It's why the phrase, I'm an old dog, I can't learn new tricks, drives me up a wall, because it is a cop-out. It is a giving into the fear that causes us to shrink back to say, I can't evolve. I can't become a better version of myself. I can't become a better leader. I could lead a team of 5. I can't lead now a team, an organization of 50 or 100 or hundreds, right? And I just want to say that's a lie. That's not true. We can learn, we can grow, we can evolve, we can develop the skills. But when this gap exists, and we begin to recognize the indicators that we've been talking about, that we're in this space, we've got to resist the temptation to just effort our way out of it, to double down on old strategies or tactics or methodologies, because we're going to say it again, what got us here won't get us there.
All right. So when we find ourselves in this moment and the old moves aren't working anymore, where do we go from here? Right. That's the question that is begging an answer. Where do we go from here?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think at this stage, growth doesn't respond to force any longer. It's not just push harder, work harder, put in more hours, right? That's the temptation. I fall into it all the time. I'm sure you do as well, right? You can't muscle your way into the next level. You can't outwork the kind of leadership that this moment requires, because what's being asked of us now isn't just a new strategy. It's a shift in who we are becoming as a human being and therefore as a leader. Our leadership development always lags behind the increasing responsibility and the pressures of what's next.
That's right.
And we always start carrying the new weight long before we know how to do that. Right. And that's what's so daunting and intimidating and can send us into this spiral of fear is, well, I don't know how to do this. Well, I'm not very good at this. Well, of course you're not, because you haven't done it before.
I've done it before.
Right. Like I know how to bench press 145 pounds, but 160, gosh, I've never done it before. Well, that's too difficult. Right. And so rather than introducing into our lives the support systems and the partnerships and the help, the spotter per se, that's going to help us increase our ability, what do? Well, I guess I've maxed out at 145 pounds.
Yeah, that's
right.
An option.
Yeah. And it's just important to recognize that this gap between who we are today and who we're becoming tomorrow is so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right. Because it taps into our ego, our pride, our sense of identity, self-worth, begins to challenge all of those parts of how we view ourselves. It's what drives insecurity, the imposter syndrome, right? Because we're being asked to lead as the kind of person that we're still trying to become.
That's right.
Right. And so here's the practice. The next time, and my guess is most of our listeners are probably experiencing this particular type of challenge in some area of their life today.
Some area, for sure.
Right. Is to give ourselves permission, instead of just going back to old habits, old tactics, to give ourselves permission to pause to slow down long enough to ask some really helpful questions. Number one, to recognize what would I have done in the past, to recognize the old defaults. And to consider where if we default to those old habits sometimes actually do need to be reintroduced in current times. But very often we have to ask the question, if I default to old ways of operating that worked in the past, what is the impact that I believe this is going to have on the current situation, right? This another question: what problems might that old solution create in this new environment? Right. So to be really clear and honest about projecting into the future, if we just keep doing things the way we've done them, is that actually going to get us the breakthrough? And then the third question is, what does the next level require of me? Before we ask, what does the next level require of my team or my business or my spouse or my kids or my friendship group, what does this next level, this uncharted territory, what is it asking of me to grow in, for me to change, for me to evolve? And that's the shift that we're looking for, right? Because we often say that the breakthrough we're looking for out there begins in here, inside of ourselves. And sometimes that's a paradigm shift. Sometimes that's new knowledge and understanding. Sometimes those are new skills, new tactics, new strategies, right? New metrics. It's learning to work in a different way. It's a recalibration of our schedules and where we're investing our time and energy. But whatever it is, I would suggest, and Don, tell me if you agree, that working with organizations, when they invite us in, it is almost always, if not always, because they are in this space between the what has been and the what could be. And they are feeling the strong pull of fear to shrink back.
Yeah.
Will we ever get there? Will I ever figure this out? Right? What if I can't make this work?
That's right.
And they invite us in because they realize they need a spotter.
Yeah.
They need a partner. They need someone to help them, to support them as they muster up the courage to wrestle with these questions and to say, okay, what needs to change inside of me so that we can get the necessary breakthroughs.
Yeah.
Right. And so we're not trying to erase the past. We're learning how to lead beyond it.
Yeah.
And the reality is, like we said before, we're not going to get this right every time. That's not the goal. The goal is to practice leading as this new kind of person, to learn the new skills, to learn the new mindsets, right? The new strategies that are going to allow us to evolve. Because here's the good news. Whether you get the necessary breakthroughs, here's the one breakthrough you will get: your own growth. That's the minimum.
That's the minimum. Yeah.
That's the minimum, right? So yay, we win no matter what.
I love that. 100%. Okay. So let's look at some stories, because like we've said a few times, this is the space that we get invited into. And so we see examples of this time and time again. Let's share a couple stories from recent experiences with clients of where the rubber meets the road on this for them.
Yeah, really great. Okay, well, do you want to start or do you want me to start?
I'll go ahead and start.
Please.
Okay, so recently I've had a similar experience with several clients. And in fact, I had a call with another person, an interest call that was they were also facing the same exact issue, which is this. They, as individuals, are high functioning, high achieving, go-getters, fast paced, fast moving. And because of that, they have become very successful in their own rights. And as their success grew, it necessitated bringing in a team around them. Well, what was required of them to achieve individual success had to shift slightly when they brought in a team of 3, 4, 5 people around them to support. But what happened is that they continued to be successful. And so now they have teams of 40, 50, 60 people, and they're feeling frustrated at this. They are stalling. They're stalling out. They're at this inflection point where it's like, man, I've had an incredible, up and to the right experience over the last 5-10 years. And now it just feels like we're plateaued. And what they're finding is, the strategies that were helpful when it was just you or a small group, the way that you could make gut level decisions, the way you could hire people based on vibes, right? And everyone was kind of in this scrappy, get it done mentality. Now you have a building. Now you have teams. Now you have people that you don't interact with on a daily basis that you're responsible for. And so I've had to have some really honest conversations to say, look, this isn't because you're failing. This is actually, you have the potential right now to become a victim of your success, though. And the invitation is you need to evolve beyond those skill sets that you leaned heavily upon to earn your early success, right? That the high achieving, the fast moving, the gut level decision making, the comfort with risk, right? That's really common we see with entrepreneurs who are building successful businesses. But at some point, it's like, I had to have a conversation with one of our clients the other day, and I said, what is your process for deciding who you're onboarding? What is your process for deciding even what type of person is needed to fill a gap on a team? And the reality was they didn't have one because they never had to in the past. But now the complexity, the pressure, the structure, the environment has changed. And the invitation, we are in that journey with them to, one, illuminate those blind spots, and two, to invite them in, to burn the ships. It's like, we can't keep, you can't keep doing it the way you've done it. And because you have been trying to do that, you're experiencing turnover, you're experiencing a breach of trust on your team, you're experiencing, all of these frustrating realities. And they're like, I don't know why this is happening. Well, it's happening because you're trying to lead in a new environment the way that you used to lead in a business that doesn't exist anymore.
Oof, wow. It reminds me, I've often shared on this podcast that my wife loves to garden, loves to plant vegetables in different seasons. And it's a real treat that we get to have these homegrown veggies in our food a lot of times. But she also has a lot of plants in our backyard. And what I've noticed is that oftentimes, I'll see her in the backyard and she's taking a plant out of a pot. And I'm like, what are you doing? And, she takes the plant out and the roots and the dirt and lays it on the ground. I'm like, you trying to kill the plant? She's like, no, silly. She's like, it needs to grow. But for it to grow, I have to repot it into a bigger pot so that the roots have more room to expand, right? Which then drives the growth of the plant on top of the soil. And it's just a powerful reminder that growth requires change. We have to change the structure, the systems, the organizational components at times. We have to lean into something new that's going to create fresh room for that new growth. And again, just a powerful question. Where do we need to repot something in our life or in our business that's going to create that room for further expansion? It's interesting too, as you're talking about hiring strategies, right? As the team gets larger, we can no longer just hire on gut and vibe and, hey, you seem really cool and I like your resume and we had a great conversation, let's do it. But also, speaking of the pot, right? What are the systems and structures of support and accountability, of development that we are creating for our employees and our teams to be able to continue to grow and to flourish, right? So where do we need to consider repotting in our lives and business? For me, when we were having this, talking pre-briefing this podcast episode, I couldn't get out of my mind an experience I had with a company recently that has grown from tens of employees to hundreds of employees.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're just an incredible case study on basically every podcast episode we've discussed. But they realized that as they're getting larger and their business is scaling, they needed to introduce a new business system, right? That would impact every single person in the company, right? Without exception, everybody would be impacted by this new business, this new business system. And what's interesting is they had introduced a new business system probably 10, 15 years ago, right? At a time when everything was on paper, spreadsheets, right? All these disconnected, technologies they were using. And they introduced the first business system. Well, at that point, they had like 30 employees. Right. They gathered all 30 people into the room, and they were able to tell them, hey, we're going to launch this business system. It's going to integrate all of the features of what we're all trying to accomplish. It's going to make everything easier. And they went about their business, and guess what? They introduced it, and very little difficulty, and it's been a success. But as the business has grown, they recently had to introduce a new business system. Well, guess what the leader of the company did? Same thing. Got on a Zoom call with every single person in the business and said, hey guys, the business is growing, we're celebrating, and we're going to introduce a new business system so that we can continue to grow. And this new business system, I promise, will make everybody's life easier. It's going to make our communication more efficient. It's going to make every feature of what we do more effective. And let's go get them.
Hurrah.
Right. They brought in a company that did a bit of training on this new system and then launched the new system. They went live like after, only a few months of training and preparation. And oh boy, it turned into chaos. Everybody was frustrated. Nobody knew who to go to for support and help. Nobody knew how to, deal with this new system. Everybody was feeling discouraged and wanting to go back to the old system. There were actually employees who literally, without anybody knowing, just continued to use the old system because it was still, present on the computers because the new system was not actually making their life easier. No. Right? Because they're in this transition period. So as I'm discussing this with the leader of the organization, I say, well, okay, tell me the story. What's going on? We've been processing this. Well, years ago we introduced a system and we did the same thing. This was our strategy of introducing it, and it worked. I said, okay, well, what's the difference today versus then, 15 years ago? Oh, well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how much is different. Well, let's just walk through this. How many employees do you have today versus then? How many different divisions? How many different physical locations are there in your business now versus back then there was one? Yeah. Now they've got like 6, 8, whatever. Yeah. Right. So how many different employees? How many different divisions? Right? How many different working parts in your business? How many SKUs? How many transactions today versus back then a day? Back then it was like 8, 10 a day. Now it's like hundreds every single day. I said, okay, let's just start there. Everything is different. Right. Everything is different. So defaulting to the way you introduced that system 15 years ago versus today, bro, what got you here is not going to get you there. And so we had to talk through some new strategies of leadership and communication and engagement and creating some new systems of support and partnership so that people didn't feel like they'd been thrown into the deep end and left to drown. So what did they do? The leader said, I need to own this. I need to be a better leader in this situation. Took our strategies that we developed together with their executive team, began to employ them. And guess what happened? It took time. Right. It wasn't an overnight, success, but over the next few weeks after that, and when they started employing these new strategies, people felt supported. They felt seen, heard, and valued. People started having new courage to learn the new business system, to problem solve without everybody freaking out. People were no longer throwing each other under the bus, right? People were starting to collaborate. Everybody was lending a helping hand where they could. And now today, though that business system is still something that people are still having to wrestle with at times, but today the way that it is serving the organization is now clear. People's lives are being made easier because of this new business system. But again, the old strategy of implementing it 15 years ago did not work in the present. But it was this leader's willingness to recognize that and to ask the question, what has to change in me about my leadership that is going to turn into the breakthrough that we're looking for as an organization that is now far bigger?
Yeah, that's such a great example. And I think, too, they had to go back to the vision, right? This is why we're doing this. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it's frustrating. And yet, our old way of operating is no longer serving us. So in order to continue to grow, we have to engage this transformation. We have to engage this change.
Yeah, I love it. All right. Well, for our listeners, we're gonna do something a little different in this episode that we are going to continue doing in future episodes. Right. And would love for our listeners to give us some feedback. At the end of each episode, moving forward, we want to take a moment to pause and to encourage our listeners. Whatever you're doing while you're listening to this podcast, maybe you're driving in a car, maybe you're waking up and you're still laying in bed, maybe you're in the pool swimming laps listening to us, maybe you're on a treadmill, maybe you're skiing down a slope on a beautiful snowy mountain. Whatever it is that you're doing currently while you're listening to this podcast, we want to give you 20 seconds to pause and to simply ask this question. What's one takeaway from this episode? We've talked about a lot. Every episode we cover so much information, so much content, so much good stuff. But for today, for this moment, identify one takeaway that you can put in your pocket, something that you can leverage that's going to help you continue to expand in your life and in your leadership. So we're going to pause 15 to 20 seconds. Whatever you're doing, think about it. If you're in a position to write it down, write it down. Write it down. What's one takeaway from this episode that you're going to carry with you into the future? So we're going to pause, let you think about it. Okay, that felt like an eternity. So
it did. Felt like an eternity. But hopefully you got something good out of it.
Yep. All right, Dawn, take us into the end.
Yes. If you are looking for more and maybe you're finding yourself in this exact moment, well, we are going to be unpacking this further in our upcoming masterclass. You'll find the link in the show notes. We would absolutely love to have you join us there.
Absolutely. And as always, if you know another leader who feels stuck between where they've been and where they're trying to get to, please share this episode with them, and we will look forward to seeing you next time.